Welcome, everyone. You are in the virtual salon living room of Globus Books, an independent bookstore in San Francisco. And today we are welcoming our guests from Jerusalem and from Israel to discuss the language and poetic language in an event that is called Where the Feeling Itself Does Not Drop You, где само чувство не покидает, а теле души. Our common language today is English, and we will be discussing also Russian and Hebrew, focusing on these two languages and the transitions. But the discussion is not limited to this. We started this series last week when we were joined by a number of speakers, and the series is called In Broken Mother Tongue. It's dedicated to the complexity of the Hebrew-Russian literary process and linguistic reality. My name is Irina Zabriskie. I'm a writer from San Francisco, and I host and produce cultural and literary shows for Globus Books. I will be introducing our participants today. The brain behind the series is Liza Michaeli. She's a writer born in Jerusalem, and she's currently earning her PhD in rhetoric with designated emphasis in critical theory and Jewish studies at the University of California, Berkeley. And she works in poetics, psychoanalysis, embodied theology, pathophysiology, phenomenology, and Jewish ethics. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing together these panels. We have a number of speakers. Last time we were joined by Rita Cogan, who is a poet and a translator and a writer, and who was reading her poetry and speaking under quite dramatic circumstances. There were sirens going and bombs exploding in the vicinity. She will not be joining us today. But today we have, and we're welcoming Nadia Adina Rose, who is a native of Moscow and immigrated to Israel when she was 22. She's an artist and author, writes poetry, teaches art, and illustrates books. Her first book of poems, Snow Ink, was published by Helicon Afik, Israel in 2015, and was awarded the prize of Israel Ministry of Culture. Manuscript of her second book of poetry, In the Belly of the Wolf, has been awarded the prize of ACUM. We also have, and we had the pleasure of having Nekoda Singer, who is an Israeli artist and writer who writes in Russian and Hebrew. Born in Novosibirsk, he worked as a decorator at the Novosibirsk State Academic Opera and Ballet Theater and studied at the Leningrad State Institute of Theater, Music, and Cinematography. In 1988, together with his wife, poet Dana Singer, who is also present and who I'll be introducing in a second, Nekoda immigrated to Israel and has lived in Jerusalem ever since. He is the author of 3 books of prose in Russian, Билеты в кассе, Roman Jerusalem, and a number of other books, as well as a novel in Hebrew written in 2016. He is a co-editor, together with Dana Singer, of the literary magazines ИО, двоеточие, Каракёй и Кадикёй. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Запятая, and other publications. He is also known as an essayist writing about Israeli history and culture. Among Singer's translations from Hebrew are David Shahar's novel, Summer in the Street of the Prophets, and A Voyage to Ur of the Chaldees, the novel Someone to Run With by David Grossman, the novel Pain by Tzruit Shalef, classical Jewish sources, including Midrashi Ruth Rabbah and Esther Rabbah. Among the translations from English is Denis Silk's Costigan, which was awarded the Nora Gal Prize in 2013. He has participated in over 60 Israeli and international exhibitions as an artist and is the finalist of the international competition Private Budapest. Gali Dana Singer, who also participated in the first installment of the series, is a Russian and Hebrew poet, photographer, artist, and translator, born in Leningrad in 1962. Since 1988, Singer lives in Jerusalem. She is the author of 7 books in Russian. Сборник, Иерусалим, 1992 год, Адель, Килька, издан в Иерусалиме, Осужденный Иерусалим, and other books. Quite a few of them, and I'm not going to read the whole list, but you can also check the description of our event for the fuller buyers. In 2020, the publishing house Barei published her electronic and audio book Забыть не. She is the author of 4 books in Hebrew and translator of Hebrew and English American poetry into Russian and of Russian and English American poetry in Hebrew. Winner of several Israeli literary awards, she is the editor of literary magazine Двоеточие with Nikoda Singer and the co-editor of the network project Artikulatsiya. Last time we also were joined by Denis Sobolev, who will be with us for the 3rd installment, which will be our fuller panel. A few more people who are not able to be here today due to various circumstances. And we all know that the situation in the world is very complicated right now. I will be introducing Globus Books, which is an independent bookstore serving San Francisco since 1971. It offers a wide-ranging stock of books on all things Russia and the former Soviet Union. We are actively working with libraries across the states on competing their holdings on Russian publications, both contemporary and out of print. And we are well known for the expertise in the first editions of Russian literature, books on the Russian avant-garde, early imprints, travel and voyage books. We also have a huge collection of Tamizdat, and we are holding these talks on YouTube channel. We have almost 70 shows in 1 year. Please check our archives and subscribe to our channel. It helps us to put together these shows. And I will just add a few words about the poster to this event on Facebook, which ironically was banned for being promoted because Facebook algorithm decided that it was pornographic. So I feel inclined to say a couple of words about this image. This is a painting by Amedeo Modeliani, a Jewish Italian painter, artist who lived in France. And the model is another artist and his partner. And her name was Jeanne Bouturne, and she was Modigliani's wife. And when he died in 1920 at the age of 35 of tuberculosis, Jeanne, who already had 1 child at the time, an infant, and who was pregnant with another, threw herself out of the window. She was the most common subject for his paintings, partially because they lived in poverty, partially because she was his muse and partner. I felt that this image really combines what we are about to discuss today, or теле, души, of the body, of the soul, because Jeanne was, to me, a soul in the body. And that's what this painting is to me, but not so for the Facebook algorithm. I'm very pleased to pass the virtual microphone to Liza Michaeli.
Thank you, Zarina. It's a great pleasure to be here in conversation with all of you. I'm, as last time, just going to say a few things to provoke some conversation, and then we can move on to our small panel today. So I want to begin with a remark that Zarina made last time about the extent to which we are physically formed by the languages that we speak. The jaw is literally formed by the language. And in this way, Russian and Hebrew, which are our preoccupation today, are muscular episodes in the lifespan of the body. And the title of this installment, где само чувство не покидает, is meant to address this structural and functional coercion. The anatomico-physiological price of the language that you speak, how the language grafts itself on your attitude, your movement, how deeply the language affects you, to what extent it slows you down, and preserves its law in your form, in the shape of your body. Metrically, tonally, you speak as if you have control, but you don't always. Your voice is so deeply connected to an experience in your body that you are carrying the drive itself of the language. So I actually want to read a poem by the great Russian Jewish poet Osip Mandelstam, whom everyone knows. It's a poem that he wrote in 1912 from his Kaimin phase, Kaimin, which of course means stone. And the significance of this, at least for us, is that there's a real coagulation of movement and of history and of blood in stone. And Mandelstam is himself aggressively restrained in his writing. The stone is itself an architectural and geological containment of experience. And only so long as the blood is contained, as the movement is contained, does the enigma of the poem, of what the poem wants to say, continue to live. And petrification there in the stone is itself a preservation of experience, which is invulnerable to exposition. Petrification is a struggle against death. It is an embodiment in the full immensity and rigidity, the full dimensionality of feeling. That's the purpose of the title, or the meaning of the title of this event. So let me read the poem. So, I mean, there really is a grotesque melody that emerges from the language in this poem. So I'm reading it, as Zarina suggested that I remark, in Russian for its poetic effect, for the tonality and the energy that it conveys, even for those who cannot understand the Russian. Я вздрагиваю от холода, мне хочется онеметь, а в небе танцует золото, приказывает мне петь. Томись, музыкант встревоженный, люби, вспоминай и плачь, из тусклой планеты взброшенной, подхватывая легкий мяч. Так вот она, настоящая, с таинственным миром связь, какая тоска щемящая, какая беда стряслась. Что если, вздрогнув неправильно, мерцающая всегда, своей булавкой заржавленной достанет меня звезда. So I'm not going to perform an analysis of the poem, but I do want to suggest that the imperative here, tamis, stands as a provocation to us today to ask, to query, how is the ultimate linguistic battle, the poetic battle, actually a battle with your body? How is the question of writing and of speaking actually a question of what to do with your body? In another poem, Мандельштам writes, «Дано мне тело, что мне делать с ним, таким единым и таким моим». So scholars would probably suggest an interconnection between творчество and тело. But that mere association between the poet's work and the poet's body, the work of language and the work of the body, wouldn't do justice to the extent of the deep psychophysiological dependence between the creator and the movement, the poetics of the text. This identification is actually vital. And for the speaker of the poem, it's vital in such a way that it makes a difference between animacy and inanimacy, between numbness and feeling, right? Не хочется онеметь, and something is ordering me to speak. But not just that, the significance of the orders «томись», «люби», «вспоминай» и «плачь» are negative because they militate against forward movement. They order to recover in place, not to heal, to love, to reopen your feeling for someone or something, for the labor of language, to tremble in the throes of the agony and to cry, to weep. In another poem, Мандельштам writes, «Я печаль, как птицу серую, в сердце медленно несу». So the labor of the language is itself a slow, invisible movement, a private struggle in the heart. And so to return to our languages today, there's something that makes you say what you need to say by necessity, what moves you in Hebrew or in Russian. And these two languages, they have radically different tempos, radically different drives and energies. And something makes you use the language in such a way that in the critical moment, in the right moment, the language is using you. This is the language of survival through you. And the change from one language to another is a turn in breath. It's actually a different way of breathing. And for anyone who speaks both Hebrew and Russian, this is a deeply embodied experience. It's a different way of holding the air, of swelling out from within. And in Hebrew, it's significant that breath and soul, nefesh and neshama, actually have roots that relate to airflow, to degrees of respiration, of suffocation and vitality, to the physical aspects of spiritual breath, in such a way that Hebrew has lungs, that it has a body, that there is a tide, and that there are waves, and that in the spirit, in the soul of the language, Hebrew is the last breath. This is what makes it a holy expenditure. And so to offer some questions as suggestions for reflection, do you feel differently when you speak Russian from when you speak Hebrew? Is there a liquid feeling in the current of the speech that determines your experience of the language? Is there an experience for you as a speaker of the impossibility of refusing the reality and the necessity of the use of the language at a given moment in time? And in terms of tempo, of the tremolo of the language, is there an experience for you of a throbbing or a languishing, of a lawlessness or an agitation, a being held in the grip, in the чувство, in the feeling of the language. And how do you experience this in your everyday? What primarily compels you to speak Russian or to speak Hebrew?
I think Nicole is prepared. You reminded me, Liza, about some point of mine. So I'm looking for it, can't find it yet.
And Adina is still not there. Tov, my writing Russian and Hebrew is very strange phenomenon, because I write in Hebrew mostly about Russian things that are connected to Russian practice, to Russian culture, to the history of Russian Jewish people. Everything that is not said in Hebrew, I write in Hebrew because it's not said in Hebrew. About matters that doesn't exist in my period of time in Hebrew. And otherwise, in Russian, I write mostly about Jewish matters, about Israel, about Israeli history. My novels are about certain periods of Israeli history. So it's very strange, because I'm not a poet. I write prose, but I feel my obligation to speak about things that are not said in the language that I'm using at the same time. So it's exactly the opposite what I think was a topic of today's conversation. I made myself this time. I decided to make myself easier task, and somewhat harder to the listeners. I will not speak about all these matters. I will read the same little fracture of my text that is part of my book. The book is written in Russian, but different stories from these books are written both in Hebrew and in English. I first wrote it in Russian, thinking Hebrew. And then I rewrote it in Hebrew, thinking Russian. And after that, some e-zine, Canadian-based e-zine that is called Jewish Fiction, asked me to translate something from something Jewish from Russian into English, and I wrote it in English, thinking both Russian and Hebrew, with a little help from our friend Gabriel Levin, English-American writer in Jerusalem. Very significant, but most of work is mine, but he made very significant improvements. So I'm going to read it now in 3 languages, and you decide where is the differences in the sound, in the matter method, in other aspects of the writing. You see, very, very easy work for me. I begin with English, with the last version. The story is this fragment is about 2 personalities, that 2 men, elderly man and a woman that lost their memory. He is well known, very old, wandering Jew. And she is some Czech Jewish woman. They are meeting in Jerusalem in the end of, after the Second World War, in the end of the 40s. The souk was bustling with activity. A dirty, ragged old man wandered from stall to stall, extending his shaky, bony hands towards the vegetables and clucking into his long, shaggy beard ko. The merchants drove him away. Hey, Yosef, got out of here, get lost, professor. Undoubtedly, you will ask, how could Jews insult and drive out the decrepit poor fellow tribesmen as if they were forgotten the laws of mercy and charity and countless touching and instructive stories told in this painful subject by our righteous sages. You may even question the author's credibility and suspect him of distorting reality and falsifying evidence. Where have you seen such things? Where did the author witness such an outrageous example of callousness? But we have no time to be distracted by the solution of Saussur's conundrum. No, the author is certainly not trying to escape from his duty to answer such legitimate questions. It's just that he is too occupied by what occurred before his very eyes. And what he sees is that his unsound elderly gentleman is staring at Ruth Israeli with his faded sunken eyes, as if he had recognized her, as if he were remembering not only her, but the whole tale in which he himself had been involved in a faraway land in the olden days. He stares at her, and his gray, tremulous lips move. If he now stares our ears, it seems that we just might grasp his words and understand his cackling speech. And we must try. We must make every possible effort to understand them, because the old man is saying something very important. Pani kotava, at last, how can it be? This is what the decrepit Jew says. There is certainly nothing special in the fact that we have begun to understand his words. Then the author has deliberately arranged things for us in such a way that we shall not trip him up, nor shall we be disappointed in ourselves. One might say that he makes sure that we behave as he intended. What is truly remarkable, however, is that Ruth Israeli herself begins to understand Joseph's start speech. Not only does she distinguishes in his cackling individual words and phrases, she suddenly recognizes her name, Pani Kokoto, like onion skin paper lifted by a sudden gust of wind from a picture in an unknown book. She seems to see for a split second the interior of a room from a long forgotten life and anonymous people etched into copper. The picture remains for her blood, but she manages to feel that to the now familiar name Ruth Israeli, to her illegal document from the kibbutz, and the useless letter from Dr. Mlinik has been added something new and of paramount importance, which henceforth will help her stay on her feet and retain her balance rather than being blown away by the slightest gust of wind. I read not all the Hebrew text, but most where I feel some difference. המסחר בשוק היה בעצומו, קשיש מלוכלך ובלוי, בעל זקן ארוך ופרוע, היה עובר מדוכן לדוכן, מושיט ידיים רעודות על הירקות ומקרקר ללא הפסק, קו. הסוחרים גירשו אותו, היי יוסף, תסתלק מפה, יאללה, לך לך פרופסור. תשאלו ודאי איך ייתכן שהיהודים מקפחים ומעליבים את בן עמם הקשיש והמסכן, כאילו שכחו לגמרי את כל חוקי הרחמנות והצדקה, ויחד איתם את אינסוף המעשים המהירים והנוגעים ללב, אשר היו מאז ומעולם בפיהם של חכמינו ז"ל, אולי אף תאבדו כל לימוד במחבר, ותתחילו חס וחלילה לחשוד בו, שמא הוא מעוות את המציאות ומסלק עובדות. האומנם כך הדבר? מנין לו למחבר ראייה לקשיחות לב מעוררת התמרמרות שכזאת? אבל אין לנו פנאי להתפנות לפתרון קושייה המסובכת הזאת. בסוף עוד קטע קצר, at in that some phrase, כאילו יתרומם דף נייר חמשי מעט. I think this onion skin paper, and in Hebrew it's נייר חמשי, it's silk paper. מעט איור בדף הספר הלא נודע, ולהרף עין מנצנצת תמונה של פני חדר כלשהו, של אנשים אלמוניים, של חיים בשכבר הימים החרוטים בנחושת. וברוסית, אזכיר שזה נכתב בהתחלה ברוסית. В зеленом ряду грязный, оборванный старик переходит от лотка к лотку, тянет трясущиеся костлявые руки к овощам и бестановочно квохтает в свою длинную кудлатую бороду. Ко-ко-ко-ко-ко. Торговцы отгоняют его. Эй, Йосеф, катись-ка ты отсюда, убирайся по добру, по здорову, профессор. Вы спросите, как это может быть, чтобы евреи обижали и гнали своего дряхлого, неимущего соплеменника, словно они совершенно забыли и законы милосердия, благотворительности, и бесчетное количество трогательных, поучительных историй, рассказанных именно на эту болезненную тему нашими праведными мудрецами. Вы, может быть, даже потеряете доверие к автору и станете подозревать его в искажении действительности и подтасовке фактов. Где это видно? Откуда это автор взял такой пример? Но у нас нет времени отвлекаться на решение этой сложной проблемы. Нет, автор не пытается улизнуть от ответа, просто он слишком захвачен тем, что происходит на его глазах. Нам придется постараться, прислушаться, приложить все усилия, чтобы его понять, потому что старик говорит что-то очень важное. Пани Кокотова, наконец-то. Вот что говорит дряхлый Йосеф. В том, что мы начали его понимать, нет, конечно, ничего особенного, потому что автор нарочно подстраивает для нас все таким образом, чтобы мы не подвели, не разочаровали его ожидания. Он, можно сказать, прилежно заботится о том, чтобы мы вели себя так, как задумано. Поразительно как раз совсем другое. Неразборчивую речь Йосефа начинает понимать сама Рут Исраэля. Она не только различает его кудахтанье слова и фразы, она вдруг узнает свою фамилию Кокотова. Словно листок папиросной бумаги от внезапного порыва ветра слегка приподнимается над иллюстрацией в неведомой книге. На мгновение мелькает изображение какого-то интерьера, каких-то людей, какой-то давней жизни, гравированной на меди. Она ничего, конечно, там не разглядела, но успела почувствовать, что к привычному уже имени Рут Исраэля, нелегальному документу из кибуца и бесполезному письму доктора Млыника добавилось нечто новое, очень важное и, возможно, наиболее весомое, что помогает ей держаться на ногах и сохранять плотность, не улетучиваясь при малейшем дуновении. Is there different text or the same text? Very hard question.
I don't want to interrupt, but
That's it.
I think that I personally hear an extraordinary difference. I think that the English cannot support the weight of the syncopation. The English just fails to carry the meaning of, not even the meaning, but the significance of what is being said. It falls abruptly flat in such a way that the Hebrew has a sensuality, a music, and the Russian has a brutal nakedness, a thrust. Especially in the parts that are the same in all three, the ko, the English doesn't support it. It simply, it's mismatched. It doesn't align. There's a misalignment. I don't know how other people feel that.
Does it mean that it's simply the very bad translation, or does it mean something more than that, something else?
It's not even, for me at least, it's not really about the translation at all. It's about the language. It's about something that inheres in the language, something that is inherent there in the energy and also in the voice that is handling it, that determines a kind of significance that touches me in a way that English cannot. But this is then relative. Obviously, I can't be unsympathetic to English. It just depends.
Yes, that's very interesting. And Zarina, what would you say?
Well, I have a different experience because I might be the only person on the panel who doesn't speak Hebrew and has very little experience of Hebrew. I have a very close friend who speaks Hebrew. And for many, many years, we've been taking walks in the morning, 1 day a week. And during this walk, her mother usually calls and they speak Hebrew on the phone. So you might say that once a week, I got my little Hebrew experience for years. It doesn't mean that I learned to understand any, but I learned to recognize it and to feel it. And I think it is extremely individual. So for me, because these walks usually happen in the Golden Gate Park and we walk around the little lake, there's a scent of eucalyptus, the ducks are flying everywhere. To me, somehow Hebrew is associated with the scent of eucalyptus.
Yes, it's very Israeli.
Well, I've been to Israel once, and it's a completely different story. That
It came from Australia in the 19th century, but now eucalyptus is very Israeli. The most Israeli attentional restaurant is called Eucalyptus in Jerusalem.
Here you go. I didn't know any of this, but this is my association. When I was listening to your story, that's I smell the eucalyptus and I basically know it through this friend of mine. So it has this personal association for me. So I didn't feel any of the power of narration like Lisa did, because I don't understand the words. The words are like walls for me.
I made Hebrew very short. It was very, very short. Like
yeah, but this is
sample.
This is my
interject very briefly. I just want to reiterate that what I'm trying to say is that to a certain extent, it doesn't matter at all what you understand. It's not about the meaning. I mean, you don't understand. Music is not to be understood. The music of the language, the feeling of the language, precisely it's to be felt. And there is something ineffable about it. It's affective. It's something you feel, actually something you feel concretely when you hear it. And it's not about the individual, it's not about the relevance of the meaning is not relevant. I mean, it is relevant, but it's not ultimately significant, I think, in determining the feeling itself of the language.
Well, this opens the whole other discussion, which we might actually carry on for the third installment, nature versus nurture. That's what we learn, right? Because say I listen to quite a bit of Native American music, Australian, Aboriginal music, which is completely different from the music or classical music that I've been listening as a child. So what is strange to me is not strange to a child who grew up in the Native American environment. The same with the language. So one sound can have completely different association. And the written word, when you see it, I'm a synesthetic. I see in languages that I can read alphabet, I see letters in a certain color. In Hebrew, I don't. It doesn't have color to me. And the letters in Russian and in English or in French, do have the color. So that's already a different experience. So I'm not that sure that without the meaning we can actually have the same experience, but I'm not sure that we can't either. So let's see what other people have to say about this. Maybe we can hear from Adin.
По поводу звучания, голоса и другого языка. Когда мне было 11 лет, то я проснулась одним утром и поняла, что я не могу разговаривать.
So as far as the sound of the voice goes and the sound of the language goes, one morning when I was 11, I woke up and I realized that I can't speak.
Я помню, что я подошла к папе, который брился в это время, и сказала, ну, когда, как бы что-то хотела ему сказать, и не могла просто это сказать. И папа на меня кричал, что перестань играть, это не смешно.
My father, who was shaving at the time, and I was trying to say something and I couldn't, and he got angry and he screamed at me, stop playing around.
С того момента, как бы несколько лет я молчала. В школе меня спрашивали, в школе меня просили, чтобы я писала ответы. Я думаю, что это такое распространенное явление достаточно в России тех лет, да, несколько, я думаю, в каждом классе было несколько детей, немало, которые заикались. Это тоже хороший вопрос. Почему, да?
I think that that was quite common, and in school I couldn't speak for a few years, and the teachers asked me to write down my answers to the questions, and I know that there were a few children in every class that had speech affects.
Родители взяли меня тогда в художественную школу, да, чтобы я как-то нашла себя в другом выражении, и я начала рисовать, и это был единственный способ, ну, самовыражения, да, в те
So my
годы.
parents took me to an art school, and I studied art, and that was the only way I could express myself.
Тоже родители взяли меня, брали меня на всякие занятия, которые как бы освобождают, помогают, чтобы дети не заикались, да. И
Well, my parents
были...
took me to different classes where they teach you to stop stuttering. And
Было много методов разных. Один из них, скажем, как наушники подключали детей к электричеству, и там бегали электроды всякие, и с одной стороны, а с другой стороны, то, что, мне кажется, в какой-то степени помогло, взяли к учительнице, к бывшей актрисе, да, которая сделала какой-то сама питхашита. Она разработала систему, что нужно делать, чтобы не заикаться.
So my parents took me to different practitioners and healthcare workers, and they used all kind of equipment, including some sort of earphones with electricity in them, not quite clear how it worked. I also was taken to a professional actress who developed her own system.
По ее системе нужно было стоять на одной ноге и говорить на затаенном дыхании, и как бы так меньше заикаешься. Что это, есть в этом какой-то резон. И что произошло, когда я приехала в Израиль, то иврит, он другой язык, он отличается тем, что как бы там очень много интонаций. Да, это практически не говоришь, а поешь.
So this teacher had the special method where you had to stand on one foot, and that somehow helped you to stutter less. And then I came to Israel, and here I had to learn Hebrew, which is a completely different language, especially since it has so many intonations.
Что еще произошло? Что когда говоришь на другом языке, ну, достаточно взрослом возрасте, я приехала в Израиль, когда мне было 22 года, то ты не ты, собственно. Ты как бы ты не говоришь от себя, ты как будто переходишь в личность другую. И что еще...
So when I came to Hebrew, I was already 22 years old, and I've learned to speak Hebrew, and it is a different experience. You are not being yourself when you speak a different language. You are speaking from some other personality, from some other self.
Кажется, что тоже по этой же причине я когда первые годы, когда была в Израиле, я все время меняла имена, приходила в Министерство внутренних дел и просила, чтобы мне переписывали имя, и смотрела, как удобнее быть, как мне быть с этим именем, как мне быть с этим именем. Это тоже как бы перемена, это тоже входить в энергию в разную.
And also, I changed a lot of names along with this linguistic self. So I would go to the Ministry of Interior Affairs to change my name officially. I was trying to see which name works for me and how does it feel to live with a different name.
Но вместе с этим я приехала я как бы окончила в Москве художественное училище 5-го года. Я приехала в Израиль, я училась здесь в Бицалеле. И, собственно, я делаю инсталляции, мягкую скульптуру шью и там выставляюсь и так далее. И какие-то годы, когда я закончила Бицалеле, у меня была мечта такая в детстве иллюстрировать детские книжки. И то, что я сделала в течение лет 10, наверное, я иллюстрировала детские книжки. Я работала достаточно с известными изданиями, с хорошими авторами, но в какой-то момент мне это надоело, потому что это как-то, все время себя подстраивать под других людей, да, делать то, что просят от меня.
So I graduated from an art school here in Israel, and I started to illustrate books, in particular children's books. I also did a lot of sculpture, soft sculpture that I was sewing together. But at some point I got sick of it or tired of it because they tell you what to do.
И тогда я захотела просто сделать свою книжку, которую как бы я могла сама проиллюстрировать. И я приставала ко всем, чтобы написали мне что-то, да, неважно что, я это проиллюстрирую, и не смогла никого отыскать. И тогда как бы от безвыходности я стала делать иллюстрации и приписывать к ним предложения, каким-то образом соединять их в какой-то рассказ. И так получилась книжка, которая называется «И тогда носорог полетел», в которой
And I decided to do the illustrations the way I wanted to do it, but I couldn't find an author. I was asking around and nobody would write something that I would like. So I started to create these illustrations and write the text here and there. And that's how the book was created. It's called And When the Rhinoceros Flew. Yes.
Окей. И когда я написала, и там, неважно, о чем тогда, я могу потом показать, если вы хотите. Когда была эта книжка, я продала права там в Бразилию, в Германию, она вышла в Израиле. И вдруг я поняла, что делать иллюстрацию мне совершенно неинтересно, а что да, интересно это писать как раз. И эта книжка была как мост такой между изобразительным миром и текстом.
So I realized then that illustrations do not interest me and that I want to write. So this book was a transition or a bridge between the world of images and the verbal expression.
Теперь, что как бы получается, что окей, я училась, когда я окончила академию в Москве, то я могла рисовать, у меня как бы есть вот такая возможность рисовать как бы все как бы закрытыми глазами, да, то есть это такая очень, ну, сильная подготовка, да. И что происходит с этим, почему я занимаюсь, скажем, инсталляциями, скульптурами и так далее, потому что когда есть такое ремесло, сильное владение ремеслом, то невозможен поиск, как бы он невозможен, он пролетает. Это как будто бы очень широкая труба такая, в которой все как бы на автомате таком пролетает, да, и, скажем, рисовать для меня, то есть, да, даже иллюстрации, которые я делала, я их как бы влепила из там та-та-та, и как бы всячески обхожу способ рисовать, потому что это, это как бы это как пустой такой, проезд такой пустой, да, совсем. И мне кажется, что с письмом это то же самое, потому что это настолько область, которая, собственно, я ощущаю себя, по большому счету, инвалидом даже в какой-то степени в этом мире, да, то есть это совсем не моя, это не то, что не моя, это то, что сильная моя сторона, это моя самая увеченная сторона. И из-за того, что из-за заикания, как бы из-за того, что это было прервано, как бы этот канал совершенно, и из-за того, что это я пишу на иврите, что это не мой язык, там у меня дислексия, к тому же и все такое. То есть это супер, это трение очень-очень сильное, как бы, то есть.
It was very easy for me because I had a good education, very strong academic art education. So because of that, my body kind of went through it. It was in a way an empty experience, like almost automatic. So I needed something more complicated. Even when I was drawing, I was avoiding drawing because that was too easy. I was trying to make the soft sculptures, which is more difficult. And so when I transitioned to the written word and writing in Hebrew, that became way more complicated because it's my weakest side. So I was handicapped in that, and therefore it was a real experience. It added more meaning and more texture, I suppose, to it.
Это все очень, это все как бы очень, непросто, но я думаю, что как бы это вещь, которая позволяет поиск как бы, настоящий, как бы, да, то есть я не знаю, как бы, то есть это как бы прибираться сквозь джунгли такие. Это одна вещь. Вторая вещь, что да.
Just one thing. So this experience for me to create in Hebrew, having in mind that I had this stuttering experience as a child, it's like going through the jungles. It's complicated. And there is another thing too.
Есть еще такая вещь, что если я пишу на другом языке, да, то есть я не думаю, что я бы смогла писать чтобы я стала писать на русском языке, потому что когда пишешь на другом языке, то такое ощущение, что ты, как поешь в душе, да, ты себя не слышишь, да, то есть есть такая отдаленность, которая позволяет это делать. Это по поводу письма. По поводу, когда я читаю, скажем, стихи, да, то я, скажем, действительно прошу очень, чтобы был микрофон, потому что говорить в микрофон это вообще как бы, то есть это как такой для меня это как якорь такой, да, который привязывает меня, скажем, к какому-то гладкому говорению, потому что это отстраняет меня, отстраняет меня от своего языка, я не узнаю себя, как бы, да.
So I don't think that I would be able to write in Russian because it's too smooth, too easy. It's like singing in the shower. You don't hear your own voice. And in the foreign language, you have this reflection angle and you have distance that allows you for a different type of writing, more complex. As far as the performing poetry goes, I always demand to have a microphone because it gives you yet another angle and yet another degree of separation. And I always hold on it to ground myself. It's like an anchor to me.
И третья вещь, что все равно, когда, скажем, я на сцене, то я хожу по ней, ищу какую-то точку, по которой это тоже немножко, ну, который есть такой как бы поток, что там стоишь и не заикаешься. Можно сделать полшага туда или сюда, и это будет совершенно другая энергия. Мне кажется, это у Кастанеда было, да, когда он ходил и искал какой-то угол, да, или какую-то часть комнаты, что там отыскать какой-то поток там другой.
And one more thing, when I am on stage, I walk back and forth, and that brings another energy, shifts it. And I think it was Castaneda who mentioned that in every room there is a source of energy. You have to walk around to find it.
Ну вот, но вместе с этим, как бы тоже, ну, из-за того, что я последнее, то, что я хочу сказать, что из-за того, что я, пришла к этому, и, из визуального мира, да, из визуального выражения себя, да, и то, когда я пишу, то я, то это, то я двигаю, мне дети мои сказали, что если мама стоит в садике и машет руками, то значит она что-то пишет, потому что, это как, это есть в этом, да, это, как лепить, да, как что-то происходит, представлять что-то физическое, что происходит, вот.
And also, because I came to writing from the visual world, the whole visual and kinetic baggage or experience came with me. So when I'm writing, I'm moving, and my children say that when they see mom in the garden waving her arms, that means she's writing something, because for me, moving and writing are similar. It's always moving. Thank you for that. That was fascinating.
I have found a short piece that Liza's talk reminded me of. It's a fragment of a poem that is called Mishe Shoteket Haolam. And I remember the difficulty to explain what does it mean to my wonderful English translator, Lisa Katz, because what can be said in Hebrew, and I think it can be said in Russian also, Тот, кто молчит мир, is completely lost in English. So the differences in meaning are very meaningful too, not only in sound or in the atmosphere or how it works on our bodies. For me, when I'm writing, it was never about being trained to write or feeling completely myself or feeling in peace with my body. It was quite the opposite, I think, and it still is. It's like, you remember the line, как души смотрят свысока на ими брошенное тело, like spirits, like souls are looking at the body they've left. So that was the aim, I think. to look at all this, at all the body and material substance from afar, on the pains, on the sorrows, on everything, from a distance that allows to go through all that. Not to go from all that, but to go through. So I'll read first this short Hebrew passage. מי ששותק את העולם, שישתוק בצורה רהוטה יותר. איני יכולה להשתמש בשפה, אבל השפה יכולה להשתמש בי, אם והאשר רק תרצה. ואם תרצה, ומתי. So that's what happens to me with any language I am writing in. And I will read you. Oh no, it will be lost, completely lost.
I can't use language, but language can use me if it.
If and whenever it will want to. The question is, yes, would you like to do it yourself, please?
I don't want to translate, but I want to add another way to convey what is being said about the extent to which language uses you is language spends itself on you at it has its own will. It does it when it wants. It's not, there's a choicelessness and involuntarity there, I think.
Yes, no, it isn't choicelessness and involuntarity. I wouldn't agree, because I'm ready for it. I agree, that's the first state. Then we'll see if the language will want to use me. You see, that's a point. So now I think I'll read a short English, not as short as this one, but quite short English poem of mine. What am I doing with that English of yours? The tongue in the cheek, jamming up King James's, making friends, themes, holy bubbles, teasing, fooling, falling in, or never again. It's an idea of a kiss. Yours, intended to be French, remains Swiss. Cheers. Hollered, speaking German on one only and outer face, like a marble strip. And I invariably making an attempt to prove Akhmatova wrong, striving to show that there is no such a thing as this hidden, hallowed boundary, running through all human closeness that cannot be crossed by love or passion. Though lips melt in the fearful silence, calm, and heart or heat breaks, those who seek it aspire to reach it, are mad, crazy, insane. Those who have reached it are stricken by longing, by gloom. There are many ways to prove people wrong, and translations is the best of them. Only these are bonds, not bounds. So you see, sometimes it happens to me even in English. And once I wrote, writing in English is worse than not writing at all, because for me it's so alien that it is not exactly the same experience as writing in Russian or in Hebrew. Anyway, it's never to be myself, it's more to be no one. Niemand, like Celan says. Though I freely use my own life experiences and talk about them. So that's about my relationship with different languages. And as a small particle of what it consists of, I will tell something that connects to Nikoda's reading and what Liza told about English being somewhat cold for the needs of this story. For myself, I always prefer to read translated literature from different languages in English, not in Russian and not in Hebrew.
So do I.
Hebrew is completely unsuitable for that means, for anyone for whom it is not a mother tongue, because it's so strong, it has such a strong flavor that anything you are reading in Hebrew will become Israeli literature or something like that. And not for that you are reading, I don't know, Ingeborg Bachmann, for example. You are seeking for something else, something different, something strange, alien. And in Russian, I don't like to read it for different reasons.
Because the translations are usually very bad.
Newest translations are
Yeah,
not really
yeah.
very good, yes, but that's another subject, completely another one. And I also want to mention something about what Nadia told about her trainer, teacher, who taught her to speak standing on one leg. It's very symbolic. It's like a story about Rabbi Hillel asked to tell all the Torah while standing on one foot. So perhaps it was for you the same experience that returns in different circumstances. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, I also wanted to add something for the whole physicality of the languages and the mix of various languages and the nonverbal as in visual art and nonverbal as in performance art, because it's very close to my heart, much closer than even I realized in the beginning of this discussion, because for me personally, not in my capacity as the producer and host of the channel, but in my capacity as a writer, I also draw and I also perform. And the one book I write what comes to me. I don't choose what to write. I don't sit down and think, well, now I will write a poem. It always comes to me and I write down whatever it is. And usually it's prose and it's always in English. It's never in Russian and it never is in any other language because I don't really know any other languages that well. So with the poems, they come very rarely, but whenever they come, I write them down. And also wherever drawings come, I draw them down just as the poems. It's the same way for me. And my drawings are always very physical and take a lot of time to put it on the paper. And when I perform, I move a lot and I always do it to the music. So this one book that I have of poetry, it was written together in collaboration with my partner, Simon Rogg. And it has my illustrations to it. And when we had the launch, we put together, and it was an unforgettable experience, our San Francisco writers community that are also very versatile. They write and paint and play music. And we did a theater show. So every poem was to the music with dancing. I have a wonderful writer friend, Sibel Sigel, who's a professional ballet dancer, dance for the New York City Ballet. And she also has some books of poetry. So she would always dance to that. And we did the backdrops from the colored drawings. So I'm going to play like just 1 minute or so, just to give the idea of what it's to me. It's a mixture of everything. And of course, one inspiration behind it is the Diaghilev seasons, and that was his idea, to mix language art, visual art, music art. And I don't know, Nikoda, I know that you worked for the opera theater and studied cinematography. It's probably that kind of mixture that inspires me, you know, everything comes together, verbal and nonverbal, and that is this one major language for me.
Dragons rise, sunrise, turn into goldfish. Eternity has fallen from the sky and dies as a black beetle on the sunken pavement. The railcars have swallowed up the destination. Maybe her men were her hats. Each time she tried one on, it fit perfectly. It felt good. It looked.
So just to give the idea of the mixture of everything, and that's pretty much how I experience the language ideally. And sometimes it could be dissected into translated, which is a completely different experience, because when you translate, you almost turn into this other person, at least for me. When I was young and doing different gigs, I once translated for a person who had an artificial arm for about a week. And by the end of this week, I couldn't move my arm at all. So that's also on how the language in the body exists non-artistically. And that was basically my response to what Adina said. So, and we do have a comment from Matthew Sam. Good to see you again and hear from you, Matthew. Matthew says, the hardest thing about translating Hebrew to English is 1,000 years of literary tradition in Hebrew, not available to English allusion. Allusion is always in play in Hebrew without analog in English. And I'll have Hebrew speakers maybe comment on that. And that's the previous comment to points made by Liza and Galidana.
I mean, as Galidana said quite well, English is inept to for the needs of the story. And there are certain things for which it is absolutely unsuitable. And that is it's not just the loss in and of the translation, it's the crime and the tragedy that in some ways it actually is better not to speak at all than to have to be reduced to or condemned to the usage of English. That's my response to that.
I won't agree, because I grew up as a child knowing no other language but Russian. And every other culture spoke to me through the books that were translated into Russian. So I'm deeply grateful to everyone who tried to bring something from other culture into another one. And why the person who speaks different languages is not always the best judge of the attempt in translation. I think we always are too
strict.
too concentrated on the differences, on the things that cannot be translated, that we are lucky to understand that others can't. till we start to translate ourselves. Then we know how difficult is the situation. So, for example, I never agree to write a critique on a book that was translated from Russian into Hebrew. Even if it will be quite easy for me, of course, to show this, and that discrepancies and something that didn't go through. I don't think it's what is necessary for culture. What other person can bring into culture, from one culture to another, from one language to another, that's the main point. So the better judge will be the one who don't speak the language that something was translated from. Of course, even in that statement, I can prove myself to be wrong, because as an editor, I have a bad luck to read such translations that leave nothing alive from the original work. Just it was just a way to prove himself for a translator. I don't know what was his ambition or intentions, but of course these are not good examples of a translator's work at all. But that's just something that happens. It can be helped. In other cases, I'm always on the side of translator, and as many translators as can be is the best thing that can happen to any culture. There are a lot of translators in Hebrew culture today, and I hope our work will be felt. That's it. Nicola, would you like to add something?
No, we're simply trying to do our best as translators, knowing that exactly the judge doesn't need to know to know the source. The example is very simple. It's everybody remembers, of course, Veniamin Yerofeyev's Moskva Petushki. It was translated into Hebrew by Nili Mirsky many years ago. And it was a very successful book here in Hebrew. I always ask, what did they like here? What did they like here? It doesn't sound like Yerofeyev. It's nothing, but the fact is, it was a cult book in Hebrew. So I am not a good judge. A good judge that these Hebrew readers, they didn't know the source. And I think it's a great work of the translator. And what I can say that this is not that, and this is not transmitted from Russian into Hebrew. It doesn't matter at all in the end.
It's quite interesting to me that the degrees of violence, I mean, the question of where and how to make the best incision, what the best cut would be, keeping things alive might mean not killing them right away, but allowing them to die slowly. And the work of the translator is profound, obviously. But it's important to acknowledge, I mean, it's not even translingual or cross-lingual. I mean, it happens anytime you speak. That's the это борьба с телом. I mean, that's the struggle with your own, with what's going on, with the internal agony that you are limited, and your impediment is actually what becomes the bridge to your capacity to express. But in the expression, something that shouldn't be exposed or forced to be brought forth, you know, that's the lethality and the vitality. I mean, it's a double bind, and there really is no way, there's no way out. I think that's the no wayness that we heard about in the story of invalidity and impediment, of what it means to make a sculpture soft, workable, endurable, livable, and breathable.
Well, it's certainly an incredibly complex phenomenon and an incredibly multi-layered discussion that we are having here. Even the fact that we are voicing our thoughts in several languages as we speak, going, you know, transitioning from one to another, symbolic in a way, and like brings it on a meta level. And I'm getting notes here from people that, you know, using words like mesmerized and stunned, and some people in the audience saving their thoughts for the third installment. So I don't have right now any direct questions to put out here for our panelists. Of course, there's so much more we could have covered, and maybe we will cover, because we didn't even lingo on accents, right? Or on such thing as dialects as a language, but I think accents in our case, because that's what our body makes and involuntary. And so maybe we will leave that for the next time. Maybe bringing back to the panelists for a final remark. Maybe Adine, would you like to say something in conclusion?
Мне кажется, что говорили по поводу переводов. С одной стороны, это действительно, ну, невозможная вещь, да, скажем, перевести, но с другой стороны, это может изменить точку зрения на мир, потому что, видишь, это как пойти в зоопарк, да, как бы, вот вам слон. Это как бы кто не видел слона, это у него меняет все мировоззрение, да, но это он не то, что он пожил в Африке, там знает их привычки, вот ходил с погонщиком слонов и так далее. Но это как бы колоссальное такое, может быть, колоссальное потрясение, да.
As far as the translations go, it's quite an impossible task. It is similar to going to a zoo where you see an elephant, and that could change your whole world because you've never seen anything like this.
Да, это то, что я хотела сказать. И я согласна с Никодом, скажем, я читала переводы Маяковского на иврит, да, его очень любят, да, его очень любят в Израиле и все такое. Но это тот, кто может прочитать Маяковского, на русском, то это что-то невозможно, что-то совсем не похоже. Но вместе с этим я могу себе представить, что это возможно вот такой, да, что это возможно для носителей другого языка, что это вот такой слон в зоопарке, да, за забором.
It's like with Mayakovsky's translation into Hebrew, which is quite a hit and very loved in Israel. And it's all good and great. And it's what Nikoda mentioned too. But, you know, if you know Russian and read Mayakovsky in original, Mayakovsky in Hebrew is something completely different. It is in a way this elephant in the zoo.
Я хотела сказать большое спасибо организаторам. Мне кажется, это интересно смотреть на двуязычие или проживание в стране, где говорят на другом языке, да, это не какое-то уникальное событие. Мне кажется, что, в общем, это половина людей, да, если не больше земного шара, да, из-за переселения, они находятся в такой ситуации, это колоссально интересно.
I just want to thank the organizers of these events, because it will be interesting to watch and discuss this living with a different language environment and living in a different country is not something unusual. It's quite a common phenomenon, and it happens to maybe a half or a big part of the population. Thank you, Adina. Спасибо.
Большое спасибо вам всем. Было ужасно приятно повидаться и поговорить, и послушать. Надеюсь, скоро увидимся.
Well, many thanks to everyone. It was great to see everyone, and looking forward to meeting next time.
Yeah.
Никуда?
Hoping that Israel will be safe and sane, and the world will be healthy, and we'll meet in real time and in real place.
Огромное спасибо всем. I just wanted to end on Mandelstam because I think it relates to it wraps everything up. Just to repeat one or two lines. Я вздрагиваю от холода, мне хочется онеметь, а в небе танцует золото, приказывает мне петь. Томись, томись, музыкант встревоженный. And томление, this trembling, this agitation, where there's no way out of the impediment, out of yourself, out of the agony, it's happening to you, and it makes you a musician. And I think that is where the search for the corner and being cornered in, being limited by the languages you speak is actually, you're being granted something in that very difficulty. That's just what
I want to add something to your reading from Mandelstam and from quoting from his book, Stone, because sometimes I think that his stone was taken straight from the hand of a beggar, of Lermontov's beggar. Somebody put a stone in his hand. So I think all this book of Mandelstam is kind of an effort to make something from this stone that we have in our hands and to see what can be squeezed of it.
И кто-то камень положил в его протянутую руку.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. It's beautiful. I was so taken away by the whole conversation that I forgot to mention that was one of my favorite poems ever. And I know it by heart always. And so, Liza, you starting with it today definitely sets the tone. And yeah, well, I mean, speaking of prorok and the whole, without the tongue, well, we can always take it, up from here the next time. And I also got a lovely comment from a Ukrainian writer, Vadim Yakovlev, who's also watching us on YouTube. And Vadim presented her book a couple of months ago, 3 months ago. But now, speaking of the languages and miracles, it's the novel written in Ukrainian. And through our show and through our store, Vadim was able to find a translator into English. So her book will appear in English as well. And that's the translation that is very, very welcome, because I want to read this book. And I can read some Ukrainian, but I think most of it is lost on me. So once it's translated into English, I'll be able to do that. And that's a joy. So speaking of translation, and something that is happening these days and now in the reality. So we hope that our shows will bring more joy of translation, more joy of language. Please join us next week. This one, series is one of the most personal for me. I usually never present my own work. I hide behind it and just host the show. But both times I was moved to share something for myself, and it's very special to me. So thank you for this opportunity. Many, many, many thanks to Liza, who is the soul behind and the body behind this whole series, and who brought together all the wonderful people that we are now hosting. So thank you very much, Liza. Thank you, Galidana and Nicola. Thank you, Adin. Thank you, audience, YouTube and on Zoom. And really looking forward to seeing you next week. Also, if you're there, please do subscribe to our channel. It helps me to bring more resources, more writers, and be safe. Please, in Israel, stay safe, and really looking forward to seeing you.